Hello YouTube, this is Troy and welcome back to the channel of The Lonely Wolf. So today I'm going to be doing a cultural critique of The Importance of Being Earnest, which is a very famous play by Oscar Wilde. So what I'm going to be doing today is linking this particular, I guess it's a very classical play, to contemporary pop culture. So a lot of cultural references that we see today. So what I'm demonstrating today is the universality, or how universal the themes of this particular play are to this very day. So I've entitled this video essay Facebook Updates, Fake Friends and Throwing Shade 101. Okay, so think of these modern concepts, so the idea of Facebook updates and throwing shade. So what does that have to do with a play like The Importance of Being Earnest? It has everything to do with that, and I'm going to demonstrate why in this video. So let's begin with a very famous quote from this book. "I never travel without my diary. One should always have something sensational to read in the train." Okay, so this reveals a certain narcissism about the character Cecily through this particular quote. Okay, so she's obviously using her diary as a way of projecting, I guess, a sensationalized version of, or a self-perception of what she thinks she has. So she has a very overinflated sense of ego and a sense of importance about herself. Now let's look what happened if we put this and transplanted this quote into contemporary culture. So let's say we replaced a diary with a phone. Okay, so how do people use phones to do the same things? Well, sometimes what we do is on our phones, so we may use social media platforms such as Facebook or Twitter to create a certain version of ourselves that we want others to see, but it might not be an authentic version of ourselves. Okay, so I'm not saying that all people do that, but I'm saying that it is a very bad habit to do. So the way in which we use social media. So the diary that's in The Importance of Being Earnest almost serves the same purpose as a cell phone, namely the software such as Facebook or all our social media platforms. It serves almost exactly the same purpose. So this demonstrates how this particular, I guess this theme transplants from one culture and from one time into another. The next thing we're going to be looking at is how this theme continues. So the idea of how this diary comes in. And so this is where it becomes very, very farcical. Alright, so I'm just going to read this section. So this is the proposal scene. Alright, so let's read this through this together. Algernon. I hope, Cecily, I shall not offend you if I state quite frankly and openly that you seem to me to be every way the visible personification of absolute perfection. To which Cecily replies, I think your frankness does you great credit, Ernest. If you will allow me, I'll copy your remarks into my diary. She goes over to the table and begins writing in the diary. Okay, so I'll skip a couple of lines, and he coughs. Cecily. Oh, don't cough, Ernest. When one is dictating, one should speak fluently and not cough. Besides, I don't know how to spell a cough. Algernon. Cecily, ever since I looked upon your wonderful and incomparable beauty, I have dared to love you wildly, passionately, devotedly, and hopelessly. Cecily. I don't think you should tell me that you love me wildly, passionately, devotedly, hopelessly. Hopelessly doesn't seem to make much sense, does it? Okay, so this is obviously a very hyperbolic scene in the play, so it's part of the, I guess, the comedy and the lightheartedness of The Importance of Being Earnest, but it does reveal a certain kernel of truth. Okay, so it's really the diary again is being used as a way to mediate between experiences. So it's kind of an object that's really blocking the authenticity of what should be a very romantic and very touching moment, and it's almost been taken away by the need to encapsulate or to record or to put our memories into a material form. Okay, so it seems to be quite a problem, this almost obsession that a lot of us have with trying to record our moments in times in some sort of material form, but at the same time we lose, I guess, our sense of presence in that particular moment.
Dana and Tracy, because you have made these promises to one another before these witnesses, and more importantly before Almighty God, I now pronounce you husband and wife. What God has joined together, let no one separate. Oh, Dana is updating his relationship status on Facebook.
Alright, so let's have a look at the present day. And so again, let's replace the diary with a phone. Okay, so there's so many experiences that I believe that a lot of people of today's generation, and not just young people, but old people alike. So a lot of us tend to have the capacity to perhaps not maximize the current moment because we're so obsessed with mediating that moment through some sort of device like a phone and trying to capture in a material form the particular moment. But, you know, by trying to create a memory, we almost don't really have the memory in our head because we're so busy trying to capture it and trying to edit that particular moment. And we see her trying to edit the proposal by suggesting that he uses different words. So that almost translates in such a prophetic way, it almost translates into the way in which we edit our own experiences. So with digital technology, we often edit the experiences we have. So we do a lot of photoshopping, or we'll put filters on our faces and things like that to try and enhance the memory or the experience we've had. Okay, so again, like I've said before, in many cases, this play is very prophetic about a lot of the vacuousness of certain aspects of society. So the next theme I want to look at is the fakeness of some friendships. Okay, so we've all seen those situations where somebody's speaking very nicely to our faces, but then underneath that there's a certain tension. So sometimes we're nice to people and then become hostile all of a sudden. Okay, so this clip is from the movie, not Scream, but Scary Movie.
So, with a backup dancer. I mean, that's nasty. That's lower than a security guard. At least security can get you backstage. She don't love herself.
I don't know. I think Buffy's sweet, Brenda.
Oh, she is as fake as press-on nails. Hey, baby girl!
Hi. What is up, my sister?
Okay. Now, what happens between Gwendolyn and Cecily? So there's a bit of a fight that happens between them based on a misunderstanding. So this is almost an opposite. Okay, so in the clip that I just showed you, it started off with the hostility and then the niceness. Okay, whereas in this particular book, it starts off with the niceness. Okay, and then it becomes the hostility. Okay, so it seems almost overtly very fake, the nature of their friendships, because they only knew each other for about 2 minutes, but they declared themselves the best of friends. But then all of a sudden, all it took was a misunderstanding because both women believed that they were engaged to the same man, Ernest, and then all of a sudden things started getting a little bit ugly from there. So which brings us to a very important theme. It's the art of throwing shade. Okay, so throwing shade is more than just having an outburst. Okay, so this is an example of something that's not very subtle. Thank you, Australia.
Okay, I thought about it. Get fucked.
Worse than a hair on an ass.
Worse than that ass hair.
Wow. I don't know. Maybe Lydia can wash her vagina with it. I don't know.
That was from the Real Housewives of Melbourne. Alright, so what I'm going to read to you is it's very much a throwing shade type scene. So I'm going to read to you a little bit of a disagreement that happens between the two characters and how something very small escalates into something big. Okay, so firstly, what do we mean by throwing shade? Okay, so what I believe that means is that it's something that's very, very subtle. Okay, so it's not an outright insult. It just means that there's something that's bubbling underneath the surface. Okay, so there might be some snide remarks that most people wouldn't sort of take it as an insult, but you know, if you look underneath it, there's an implied insult that happens behind the so-called throwing of shade. Okay, so let's read through the scene. So it involves the tea. I call it the tea scene and the cake scene. So Cecily says, "May I offer you some tea, Miss Fairfax?" To which she replies, "Thank you." And then aside, she said, "Detestable girl," so it's under her breath. "But I require tea." "Sugar?" "No, thank you. Sugar is not fashionable anymore." "Cake or bread and butter?" "Bread and butter, please. Cake is rarely seen in the best homes nowadays." So Cecily cuts a very large slice of cake and puts it on the tray. "Hand that to Miss Fairfax." So which Gwendolyn, she starts getting very angry. "You filled my tea with lumps of sugar, and though I asked most distinctly for bread and butter, you have given me cake. I'm known for the gentleness of my disposition and the extraordinary sweetness of my nature, but I warn you, Miss Cardew, you may go too far." To which Cecily replies, "To save my poor innocent trusting boy from the machinations of any other girl, there are no lengths to which I would not go." To which Gwendolyn says, "From the moment I saw you, I distrusted you. I felt that you were false and deceitful. I am never deceived in such matters. My first impression of people are invariably right." To which Cecily replies, It seems to me, Miss Fairfax, that I'm trespassing upon your valuable time. No doubt you have other calls of a similar character to make in the neighbourhood. Okay, so look at how, so it's such a almost ridiculousness, the level of interaction between these characters. So their first judgment of each other is they're instantly the besties, you know, best of friends. And then all of a sudden they say, you know, from the moment I saw you, I didn't like you. So that was my first impression. Okay, so you see a lot of these interactions today. Now, I'm not going to be sexist in this video because, you know, the male characters in this particular play are just as vacuous and just as comical, and they make pretty much the similar types of mistakes, and they have similar flaws in the sort of vacuousness and I guess the emptiness of their characters. Okay, so I'm going to leave you with another little pop culture tidbit. So this is from the hit Dynasty. Okay, so let's replace the tea and the sugar or lack of sugar and the bread and butter or cake, and let's replace that with caviar and champagne, and this is the result. Okay, so it's almost a mirroring of this scene, so you'll see a lot of similarities. Okay, thank you for watching, and I'll see you again in my next video.
It's burned. Is it? The champagne was obviously frozen in the bottle at some point. If the champagne is too burned for your taste, Miss Devereux, don't drink it. The caviar, I trust, is not burned. I really wouldn't know. This is Osotrova, and I prefer Petrosian Beluga. Look, Miss Devereux, whatever it is that you're doing in Denver, I suggest that you tread very carefully.